Captain Ethan Cole sat alone in the viewing deck of the Terran embassy ship Aurora. The stars stretched endlessly before him, silent witnesses to the meeting that would change the course of history. Ethan was in his mid-30s with calm blue eyes and a face marked by the quiet confidence of a man who had seen too much war and yet refused to let it break him. He had been a soldier, a pilot, and now, against his will, a diplomat. The uniform he wore was crisp, but his hands bore the faint scars of someone who had once held a rifle rather than a stylus. The Galactic Council's main chamber shimmered with light as alien delegates gathered. Each species had sent its best, towering reptilians with polished scales, insectoid swarms encased in glimmering armor, and ethereal beings of light and mist. Humanity's presence, by comparison, was small. Just Ethan and Admiral Laura Brooks, a woman known across the stars for her iron will and razor-sharp words. She stood beside him, her silver hair tied back, her gaze steady as the council speaker, a tall, crystalline being known as Varen of the Shard Collective, began to speak. Members of the Galactic Council, Varen's voice rang through the chamber, each word vibrating in the air like a song. Today we move forward with a step toward peace. The Treaty of Cylon V will bring an end to primitive weapons of destruction. From this day forth, all projectile weapons are banned under galactic law. A ripple of agreement passed through the crowd. The insectoids clicked their mandibles approvingly. The reptilian representatives gave slow nods. Even the mist-like Ardon shimmered brighter in what seemed like satisfaction. To them it was progress, another sign that the galaxy was evolving beyond its violent past. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. He had fought in the Rim Wars, seen how easily civilizations fell when stripped of their defenses. He wanted to speak, but Admiral Brooks placed a hand on his arm. Her voice was calm but firm. "Not yet," she whispered. Varen turned toward the human delegation. "Captain Cole, Admiral Brooks, does humanity accept this law in the name of unity and peace?" Laura Brooks stepped forward. "Humanity supports peace," she said carefully. "We always have. But we must ask, why ban projectile weapons entirely? Energy-based weapons already dominate the battlefield. What harm do you believe this will prevent?" Varen's crystalline body pulsed with light. "Projectiles are chaotic, uncivilized. They cause unnecessary suffering, and their spread cannot be easily controlled. Lasers and plasma can be regulated. Bullets and shells cannot." A low murmur echoed through the chamber as Brooks pressed further. "And what of the smaller worlds? The frontier colonies that lack access to your high-tech energy cores? You would disarm them completely." "The Council will provide protection," Varen said. "There will be no need for primitive defenses." Ethan couldn't hold his tongue anymore. "That's not protection. That's dependency." Every eye turned toward him. The chamber grew silent. Even the translators hesitated for a moment. Brooks gave him a look, but she didn't stop him. Ethan continued, his voice steady but low. "I've fought in wars you've only read about. I've seen colonies burn while waiting for Council protection that never came. Projectile weapons aren't chaos, they're a tool. A simple, reliable one. When you outlaw them, you're not making peace. You're just making sure the next war belongs to whoever controls the power grid." For a brief second, silence filled the chamber again. Then Varen's tone hardened. "Captain Cole, your passion is noted, but sentiment cannot stand in the way of progress. The treaty will pass. Humanity will sign, as will all Council members. The age of crude ballistics ends today." Brooks sighed quietly. "Then so be it," she said, and added under her breath, "We'll adapt." The vote was unanimous. The Treaty of Cylon V was ratified. Across the stars, factories shut down, and centuries of weapon design were declared obsolete overnight. Energy-based systems became the new law of war and peace. The galaxy congratulated itself. The news networks called it the dawn of a new age, but humanity did not celebrate. Ethan and Brooks stood on the deck of the Aurora as the ship prepared to leave the Council station. The glow of alien ships reflected off the hull like distant stars. "Do you think they're right?" Ethan asked quietly. "Maybe it's time we moved on too." Brooks gave him a long, tired look. "Ethan, progress isn't always about abandoning what works. It's about finding better ways to use it." She glanced out at the stars. "They think they've made the galaxy safer. What they've really done is challenge us to think differently." Ethan nodded, though a small smile tugged at his lips. "You mean we're going to find a loophole?" Brooks smirked. "We're human. Loopholes are our specialty. As the Aurora entered jump space, the stars stretched into ribbons of light. The treaty's words echoed across the galaxy, binding every nation under one law. But laws were only as strong as the imagination of those who followed them. And no species in the galaxy had more imagination than humanity. 3 years had passed since the Treaty of Ceylon. The galaxy had changed, but not for the better. The once bustling human colonies on the rim now lived under constant fear. Energy-based weapons, the only kind allowed under galactic law, were clean, efficient, and useless against certain enemies, especially the Zareth Dominion. Captain Ethan Cole stared at the tactical display aboard the Terran frigate Resolute. The screen flickered with red markers, each one representing a Zareth warship approaching the colony world of New Carthage. The Zareth were insectoid, six-legged monstrosities with carapaces that refracted energy beams like mirrors. Lasers barely scratched them. Plasma fire only made their armor glow brighter. They were the perfect predators in a galaxy that had outlawed real bullets. Shields at 70%. Said Lieutenant Nora Hayes, a young officer with a calm voice and steady hands. She'd only seen one real battle before this. Their plasma rounds are eating through our deflectors. Ethan's jaw tightened. They're not plasma rounds, Lieutenant. They're organic matter projectiles, acid shells. She turned, frowning. But that's illegal. He gave a dry laugh. So is dying without a fight. Outside the viewport, space came alive with chaos. Zareth ships moved like living creatures, their hulls rippling with bioluminescent patterns. They didn't follow standard fleet formations. They swarmed. The Resolute and her escorts tried to hold the line, but their energy weapons glanced harmlessly off the enemy. Every shot looked beautiful, streaks of blue and green light across the void, but beauty didn't win wars. Signal from Admiral Brooks, Nora called. She's ordering all ships to fall back to the planet's orbit. Ethan's hand hovered over the console. He could hear the panic in the comm channels. Colony defenses were failing. Civilian transports were evacuating, but they wouldn't make it in time. No, he said. We're staying. Sir? If we fall back now, they'll destroy the transports. The colonists don't have time. But our weapons can't penetrate their shields, she protested. Ethan looked out the window, his eyes narrowing. Then we'll have to stop thinking like everyone else. He remembered what Brooks had said the day the treaty passed. We'll adapt. Humanity always did. If the galaxy took away their tools, they'd just make new ones. He turned toward his weapons officer. Load the coil guns. The room went silent. Sir, those are training prototypes, the officer stammered. They're not approved for combat. They don't use chemical propellant, Ethan replied. Electromagnetic acceleration. Perfectly legal. A nervous laugh escaped from one of the crew. You're joking. I never joke about loopholes, Ethan said with a smirk. The Resolute's engineering team scrambled to reroute power to the ship's magnetic rails. The coil guns had been developed years ago as a curiosity, part of an old human weapons experiment abandoned after the ban. They were weak, short-ranged, and wildly inefficient, but they could fire solid metal. That was enough. Target the lead Zareth cruiser, Ethan ordered. Aim for the thorax section right under the emitter nodes. The gunner hesitated. At this range, sir, the shot will take 7 seconds to hit. Then we'll count together. The magnetic rails hummed. Power surged through the ship, and a deep vibration filled the deck. The crew exchanged uneasy looks. For the first time in years, a human vessel was about to fire a kinetic weapon. Fire. A single tungsten rod shot out into the blackness of space. No flash, no sound, no beam of light. Just a streak of invisible death traveling at Mach 20. 7 seconds later, the enemy cruiser shuddered violently. Then it tore in half. The crew gasped. The explosion was silent in the vacuum, but the visuals were enough. The Zareth ship was gone, shredded by its own internal pressure. Nora stared at the display. It worked. Ethan leaned back, his expression calm but proud. Physics always works. Word spread fast. Across the fleet, captains began activating their own forgotten coil guns and magnetic cannons. Within hours, the Zareth advance faltered. For every 10 human ships destroyed, one kinetic slug would pierce a Zareth hull, and that one shot was worth 100 energy blasts. By the time Admiral Brooks arrived, the sky above New Carthage was littered with burning wrecks. She opened a secure channel. Ethan, I don't know whether to court-martial you or give you a medal. I'll take whichever comes with a pay raise, he said dryly. She laughed softly. You realize what this means, don't you? He nodded. We just broke galactic law. Technically, she said, we didn't. There's no chemical propellant. No projectile explosives. The Council's treaty never mentioned magnetism. Ethan smiled. Then I guess we just got creative. That day, the Resolute became a legend. The footage of its first kinetic strike spread through human networks faster than any official broadcast. Soldiers whispered about the ghost bullet that killed a cruiser. Engineers began sketching designs for improved rail weapons. Governments quietly funded secret research programs. Humanity, once the obedient new member of the Council, had rediscovered something older than law: adaptation. The galaxy, meanwhile, reeled in confusion. Council leaders demanded answers. The Zareth refused to admit defeat, calling the humans barbarians clinging to dead technology. But even their arrogance couldn't hide the truth. The humans had found a loophole, and it worked. As the Resolute entered orbit to oversee the evacuation, Ethan looked down at New Carthage, a scarred but surviving world. He didn't feel pride, only resolve. The Council could write all the laws they wanted, but as long as humanity existed, so would invention. And in the quiet hum of the ship's magnetic rails, Ethan Cole knew this was just the beginning. The shipyards orbiting Mars were silent to the outside world. Officially, they were decommissioned after the Treaty of Kellan-Fifth. Unofficially, they had become the beating heart of a project so secret that not even the Galactic Council's surveillance networks could find it. Every transport, every data link, every conversation was disguised as civilian cargo operations. But deep beneath the metal bones of Dock 9, sparks danced in the shadows as humanity began rewriting the rules of war. Colonel Marcus Dean stood on the observation platform, a mug of cold coffee in his hand. He had served under Admiral Brooks during the Rim Wars, back when humans still fired bullets and missiles instead of beams of light. He missed those days. Simple times, brutal maybe, but honest. Now he was in charge of something far beyond simplicity. A weapon that would turn the galaxy's most arrogant law on its head. Below him, the engineers worked around the clock. Sparks flew from magnetic coils the size of shuttlecraft. Automated cranes moved plates of dense titanium alloy into position. The air smelled of oil, ozone, and caffeine. At the center of it all was Dr. Alice Rivera, the brilliant physicist who had once designed power systems for colony reactors. She was small, sharp-eyed, and spoke faster than most people could think. "Colonel," she said, not looking up from her terminal, "we've stabilized the field collapse in the third rail segment. Power loss is down to 0.3%. Marcus grinned. "That means it works?" Alice smirked. "That means it doesn't explode when we fire it yet." He chuckled. Progress. The prototype weapon stretched across the chamber like a sleeping beast, a magnetic accelerator almost half a kilometer long. Its inner rails shimmered faintly as electric currents rippled through them. This wasn't just another coil gun. It was the culmination of every outlawed idea humanity had quietly nurtured in the dark. And it had a name. Railstorm, not Ethan Cole, arrived 2 weeks later, summoned under the pretext of a classified debriefing. When he stepped off the shuttle, he was greeted by Marcus and Alice, both wearing identical grins that made him suspicious. "Captain Cole," Marcus said. "Welcome to Mars' least legal workshop," Ethan frowned. "If this is about New Carthage, I already filed my report." "Oh, this isn't about paperwork," Alice interrupted, handing him a data pad. "It's about making sure what you did by accident we can do on purpose." Ethan scrolled through the schematics. His eyebrows shot up. "This thing's massive. You're building a planet killer." Alice shook her head. "Not a planet killer, a problem solver. The Zareth thought energy was the future. We're about to remind them that the universe still runs on momentum." Marcus leaned against the railing. "Every civilization in the galaxy thinks they've tamed physics with laws and treaties. But you can't outlaw the fundamentals. You can ban bullets, but you can't ban velocity." Ethan looked back at the weapon. "So this is what humanity does when someone tells us no." Alice smiled. "We find a way to say yes." Weeks turned into months. The Martian shipyards buzzed with quiet energy. Word of the railstorm spread only through whispers. Coded messages passed through encrypted channels. A handful of trusted officers joined the project. Engineers designed rail cannons small enough for ships and massive enough for orbital platforms. The dream was simple, a fleet that could fight without breaking the law. One evening, as the red sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan stood with Alice on the viewing deck. The first Railstorm prototype was mounted on the test platform, aimed toward an asteroid drifting a few million kilometers away. "Think it'll work?" he asked. Alice shrugged. "In theory, yes. In practice, maybe. In spirit, absolutely." Ethan laughed softly. "That's reassuring." The countdown began. The weapon charged with a low, humming sound that grew into a thunderous vibration. Lights flickered across the chamber as power conduits strained. Then, with a blinding flash, the Railstorm fired. The tungsten slug tore through space faster than anyone could track. The asteroid shattered instantly, fragments scattering into a glowing cloud. The entire station trembled from the recoil. Alice exhaled. "Holy hell." Marcus's voice came over the comms. "That, my friends, is the sound of history being rewritten." Ethan grinned. "You just made every lawmaker in the galaxy sweat." "Good," Marcus said. "They should." Within weeks, blueprints spread to secret labs on Luna, Titan, and even the hidden bases beyond Jupiter. Humanity had gone silent on the galactic channels. The Council thought they were weakened, retreating, complying. In truth, they were preparing. Admiral Brooks arrived for inspection months later. She was older now, her hair streaked with gray, but her eyes burned with the same determination. As she stepped onto the observation deck, the engineers saluted. "Report," she said. Marcus handed her a data slate. "We can fire 3 shots per minute, range up to 5,000 kilometers, accuracy within 1 meter. Power requirements are high but sustainable." Brooks looked over the numbers, then smiled faintly. "You did it." "You actually did it," Alice crossed her arms. "We did what humans always do. We turned a rulebook into a challenge." Brooks nodded. "The Council will call it barbaric. The aliens will call it cheating. But they'll all remember one thing. Humans don't surrender their edge." As she looked through the viewport at the gleaming rail system, she added quietly, "Prepare for deployment. We'll need these before the next attack." Ethan stood beside her. "And when that happens?" Brooks smiled. "Then the galaxy will learn the meaning of creative warfare." When the Railstorm finally left orbit, every human in the system paused to watch. The great weapon shimmered in the sunlight, a monument to defiance and ingenuity. It wasn't just metal and magnets, it was a statement. You can ban our weapons. You can write your laws. But you'll never cage human creativity. And as the engines flared to life, Colonel Marcus Dean whispered to himself, "Let's see what happens when the galaxy meets physics again." The colony world of New Carthage was burning again. The Zareth Dominion had returned, larger, angrier, and certain that humanity's victory years ago had been nothing but luck. This time they brought 3 fleets, massive living ships that pulsed with an eerie blue glow, each the size of a small moon. They swarmed through orbit like a plague of locusts, blotting out the stars. Captain Ethan Cole stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching the tactical display unfold. The enemy fleet moved in a perfect arc formation, surrounding the planet below. Civilian transports were still trying to escape, but every corridor was blocked. The Zareth weren't here to conquer. They were here to exterminate. Beside him stood Admiral Laura Brooks, now commander of the Terran Defense Fleet. Her uniform was scorched from an earlier skirmish, but her voice was steady. "They think we're finished," she said quietly. Ethan gave a half smile. They always do. The bridge crew worked in tense silence. Dozens of human ships orbited in defensive positions, their railguns charged, their reactors glowing like the hearts of giants. Above them, in high orbit, hung the secret weapon humanity had been building in the shadows, the Railstorm array. It wasn't just a gun. It was a network of orbital platforms connected by synchronized magnetic fields. Together they could fire projectiles across the entire system. Every bolt, every coil, every atom of it was built on a single principle. If the galaxy banned projectiles, then humanity would turn the very stars into slingshots. "Enemy fleets closing," said Lieutenant Nora Hayes, now Chief Tactical Officer. "They're charging plasma emitters." Brooks leaned forward. "Activate the array. Target their command vessel." Ethan turned to her. "You want to announce it already?" She smirked. "If we're going to break the galaxy's favorite law, we might as well do it with fireworks." High above, the Railstorm array came alive. Electromagnetic conduits flared like streaks of lightning. The hum of charging rails echoed through the void, carried by vibration sensors on every human ship. Even from the surface of New Carthage, colonists could see bright flashes cutting across the sky. "Power levels stable," Nora reported. "Projectiles loaded." "Fire on my mark," Brooks said, her voice low but unwavering. 3, 2, 1. The sky screamed. 10 tungsten rods, each the size of a shuttle, shot from orbit at a fraction of light speed. They left no trail, no beam, just a flicker on the sensors before impact. The Zareth fleet's shields barely registered them. Then, all at once, the rods hit. The first one punched straight through the Dominion flagship's bow, exiting through its rear engine in a cloud of molten debris. The second cracked another cruiser in half. The third hit the surface of New Carthage's upper atmosphere, where a Zareth command carrier was descending. It disintegrated in a white flash visible from space. The battlefield went silent. Ethan watched the readings, stunned. Direct hits. Multiple enemy vessels destroyed, Nora whispered. The shields didn't even react. Brooks allowed herself a small, grim smile. That's because you can't deflect momentum. But the silence didn't last. The Zareth regrouped, their swarm-like ships shifting tactics. They fired organic plasma, a toxic storm that melted through several smaller Terran frigates. The Resolute shuddered as one wave of energy grazed its hull, frying external sensors. Return fire, Ethan barked. All ships coordinate magnetic trajectories. Let's remind them what Newton's third law means. Dozens of Terran ships opened fire in perfect unison. Magnetic rails launched projectiles of every size. Steel rods, titanium slugs, even sharpened debris from destroyed ships. The void turned into a storm of invisible death. Each impact tore through the Zareth formations, shattering ships that had never known true physical force. The aliens panicked. Their communications flickered across intercepted channels full of confusion and fear. To them, humanity's weapons were invisible ghosts. There were no beams to dodge, no signals to jam, only sudden, unstoppable destruction. In the command seat, Brooks spoke softly, almost to herself. They called us primitive. Ethan's grin widened. Primitive's working pretty well so far. On the surface of New Carthage, civilians watched as streaks of light carved the heavens. Children pointed to the sky where Zareth ships fell like dying meteors. A farmer whispered. They said we were helpless. His neighbor replied, Not anymore. At that same moment, on the Galactic Council station hundreds of light years away, chaos erupted. Ambassadors from dozens of species shouted over each other as reports came in. Someone had used projectile weapons again, but it wasn't gunpowder. It wasn't chemical. The humans had found the loophole. Baron of the Shard Collective slammed a crystalline hand on the table. This is an abomination. They are twisting the law's intent. The Terran ambassador simply folded her hands and smiled. With all respect, Counselor, we followed the letter of your law exactly. Back in orbit, the last of the Zareth command vessels began to flee. Brooks didn't give chase. Instead, she looked out at the burning wreckage and spoke quietly. Let them run. They'll tell the others what happened here. Ethan exhaled, his hands trembling slightly. The battle was over. Humanity had won again, not through brute strength, but through cunning. Nora turned from her console. Admiral, the array's systems are stable. We can reload and fire again within 10 minutes. Brooks shook her head. No, let's give them time to understand what just happened. Fear is a better weapon than any bullet. As the stars settled into silence, the Resolute drifted slowly through the debris field. The crew watched the shattered fragments of alien ships glint like diamonds against the black void. Somewhere deep inside that silence, a new legend was born. The galaxy had made its rules. Humanity had followed them to the letter. And in doing so, they had broken them completely. Ethan looked up at the stars, his voice quiet but certain. You can ban our weapons, he said, but you can't ban physics. Brooks smiled faintly. And that's what makes us dangerous. That night, across human space, transmissions of the battle spread like wildfire. Soldiers cheered, scientists wept, and the rest of the galaxy listened in stunned silence. Humanity had reminded them all of a truth older than civilization itself. Ingenuity always finds a way. The Galactic Council chamber on Salon Prime was never meant to feel fear. It was designed to inspire awe, its walls lined with silver latticework that shimmered with faint energy, its ceiling a living hologram of the stars. Delegates from across 1,000 worlds gathered there to settle disputes, write laws, and proclaim peace. But on this day, the chamber was filled with shouting. The humans had broken the balance. Baron of the Shard Collective stood at the center podium. light rippling across his crystalline body as his voice reverberated like breaking glass. They have violated the Treaty of Kelon 5. They have used projectiles in open warfare. The Terrans mock our laws and spit upon the very foundation of galactic peace. Hundreds of alien delegates responded in a chorus of outrage. The reptilian Karth hissed and slammed their tails. The ethereal Ardon pulsed in angry bursts of color. Even the calm, plant-like Solari rustled their fronds in agitation. The chamber had not seen such chaos in centuries. At the far end of the floor, the human delegation sat quietly. Admiral Laura Brooks was there, dressed not in uniform but in the dark, formal robes of a Terran ambassador. Her expression was unreadable. Beside her stood Captain Ethan Cole, looking as though he would rather be anywhere else. He had never been one for politics, but Brooks had insisted. "If they're going to judge us," she'd said, "they'll do it to our faces." The council speaker, Varen, slammed his crystalline staff against the floor. "Order! The humans will speak for themselves." "You stand accused of violating interstellar law. What say you?" Brooks rose calmly. Her voice was steady, but every word carried weight. "Humanity has not violated your law." The chamber erupted again, but she continued over the noise. "The Treaty of Kelon 5 prohibits chemical and explosive projectiles. It says nothing about electromagnetically propelled matter. The Railstorm Array operates entirely within the energy regulations your own council approved." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The Ardon delegate flickered nervously. The Karth ambassador slammed his claws on the table. "Semantics. You twist the spirit of the law." Brooks's lips curved slightly. "Spirit is not law, counselor. Words are. You wrote them. We followed them." Ethan watched her with quiet admiration. Brooks had always been calm under fire, whether from lasers or politics. Still, he could feel the hostility in the air. The aliens weren't just angry. They were afraid. Humanity had done something unthinkable. They had changed the game. Varen's voice rang out again. "And what of the destruction you caused? Entire fleets annihilated, civilizations destabilized. Is this your idea of peace?" Ethan stood then, unable to stay silent. "Peace?" he said, his voice low but clear. "You mean submission. The Zareth invaded our colonies. They burned our cities. The council stood by and watched. We defended ourselves the only way we could." Varen's crystalline edges glowed red. "You escalated conflict beyond reason." Ethan took a step forward. "No, counselor. We reminded the galaxy what reason looks like when laws stop making sense." Brooks placed a hand on his arm, a silent signal to let her take it from there. She turned back to the assembly. "You can't outlaw creativity. You can't legislate survival. Humanity did what we've always done. Adapt." A hush fell over the chamber. Then, unexpectedly, the Solari representative spoke, their voice like wind through leaves. "Perhaps the humans are not wrong. The treaty was made to stop chaos, not to stifle evolution." Varen turned sharply. "You would defend them?" "We would observe them," the Solari said. "The Zareth's power grew unchecked because of our restrictions. The humans found balance where our law created weakness." The council erupted again, but this time the arguments were less unified. Some species called for punishment. Others whispered about alliances. A few even seemed intrigued. Humanity had proven that creativity could triumph over bureaucracy, and in the process, they had exposed how fragile the galactic order truly was. Hours later, after the session ended in chaos, Brooks and Ethan stood outside on the council balcony overlooking the glowing city of Sealan Prime. The skyline shimmered with floating transports and distant lightning storms. Ethan leaned on the railing. "So what now? They can't all be happy about us turning their precious laws into a joke." Brooks smiled faintly. "They'll argue. They'll debate. Some will condemn us. Others will copy us. That's how it always goes. You think they'll try to build their own rail weapons?" She nodded. "Oh, they'll try. But they'll never match us. They don't think like we do." Ethan chuckled. "You mean recklessly?" "I mean creatively," she replied. "The difference between them and us is that they build to preserve order. We build to survive." He looked out at the stars. "You know what I think scares them the most?" Brooks raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "That we didn't just find a loophole. We built a future around it. Back in human space, the Railstorm Array became more than a weapon. It became a symbol." Recruitment surged. Engineers from every colony volunteered to improve its design. Students studied magnetic theory like religion. The words "you can't ban physics" appeared on recruitment posters, ship hulls, even classroom walls. Meanwhile, in the dark corners of the galaxy, other races began whispering. The Karth began secret tests with kinetic munitions. The Solari asked to send scientists to Earth. Even the Ardan, long known for their pacifism, quietly requested a meeting with Terran engineers. The galaxy had entered a new era, one humanity had forced into existence. Weeks later, Brooks received a private transmission from Varen. His voice was colder now, the shimmering tone replaced by something harder. "Admiral Brooks," he said, "the Council will not forget what your people have done. You have changed the rules, but remember, every rule can be rewritten." Brooks smiled faintly. "Then you'd better keep up." The transmission ended. She turned to Ethan, who stood nearby. "They'll come for us eventually," he nodded. "Then we'll be ready. Again." Brooks looked out at the distant Earth, glowing blue and bright against the void. "They wanted to make war civilized. We reminded them that war was never meant to be polite." And as the stars burned silently beyond the window, the galaxy's most controversial law had become humanity's greatest advantage. The age of energy weapons was ending. The age of momentum had begun. The research bays of Luna Base had never been this busy. Every corridor glowed with white light. Every workstation hummed with energy. Engineers, scientists, and soldiers moved together in a chaotic symphony of purpose. Humanity was no longer just surviving. It was evolving. Dr. Alice Rivera stood at the heart of it all, her lab coat half burned from a recent test gone wrong. Around her, magnetic coils sparked like lightning as they charged. "Increase the current to 600 megawatts, she shouted over the roar of machinery. "And someone stabilize the damn field generator before we lose another wall." Her assistant, a nervous young technician named Leo Carter, scrambled to obey. "Ma'am, if we push it any further, we'll overload the coils." Alice gave a grin that was half mad, half inspired. "Then we'll learn something new when it breaks." That was how progress worked now, through failure, through risk, through human stubbornness. The Railstorm had changed everything. The Galactic Council still debated its legality, but humans had moved on. Every nation, every colony, every orbital station wanted their own version of it. From the smallest defense outposts to the massive shipyards orbiting Jupiter, humanity was building rail weapons faster than the Council could write new laws. Admiral Laura Brooks arrived at Luna Base that morning, escorted by Captain Ethan Cole. The two stepped through the glass doors of the main lab, where the hum of experimentation was constant. Alice looked up from her console and grinned. "You're just in time. We're about to make history again." Brooks raised an eyebrow. "Last time you said that, you vaporized a test satellite." Alice shrugged. "That was a necessary sacrifice to science." Ethan chuckled, his eyes scanning the rows of experimental cannons. Some were small enough to fit on starfighters. Others looked big enough to launch a moon. "You've been busy." Alice wiped her hands on her coat. "Busy doesn't begin to cover it. The Railstorm was just the start. We're working on microcoil, arrays, self-guided kinetic drones, and atmosphere-based launchers. If it moves, we can weaponize it." Brooks smiled faintly. "You've turned creativity into a weapon system." Alice's eyes gleamed. "Exactly. The galaxy thought we were limited by energy weapons. But you can't limit ideas." Hours later, the three of them stood on the test range, a massive chamber carved into the lunar rock stretching for kilometers. At the far end hung a reinforced target drone, its hull made from Xerith crystal plating, the same material that once made alien ships untouchable. Alice typed a few commands into her console. "We call this model the Gauss Spear, a hybrid fighter weapon system. It uses atmospheric magnetics to generate thrust and launch dense tungsten flechettes at hypersonic speed." Ethan whistled softly. "That's a lot of words for giant space dart." She smirked. "You're not wrong." The chamber lights dimmed as the weapon charged. Blue arcs of electricity danced across the coils. The hum grew deeper, vibrating through their bones. Then, with a thunderous flash, the Gauss spear fired. The projectile vanished into the void, and a second later, the target exploded into molten fragments. The impact shockwave rippled through the chamber walls. Ethan blinked. That wasn't supposed to happen, was it? Alice's grin widened. It exceeded expectations. Brooks folded her arms, impressed. How far can it shoot? Through atmosphere? About 1,000 kilometers. In space? A few million, depending on trajectory. Ethan let out a low whistle. You just turned every fighter pilot into a long-range sniper. Alice nodded proudly. We're calling it momentum warfare. Energy weapons burn out, but kinetic energy never lies. It's the oldest law of physics. Equal and opposite reaction. Brooks smiled. And our reaction just changed galactic warfare forever. Word of humanity's new inventions spread like wildfire. Some species condemned them as violations of interstellar ethics. Others tried to imitate them, often with catastrophic results. The reptilian Karth lost 2 shipyards in failed coil gun tests. The Solari, more cautious, began studying Terran materials under the guise of energy efficiency research. But the Zareth Dominion, they seethed. In the depths of Zareth space, their leaders gathered around living bio-holodisplays, watching footage of the Railstorm's devastating strikes. They break the law, one hissed. They mock the Council. They defy physics itself. Another, smaller one replied, Then perhaps we must evolve as they do. That single phrase marked the beginning of a new arms race, the age of creative war. On Luna Base, Alice sat in her quarters late that night, sipping cold coffee as she wrote her report. Her latest paper, Momentum is the Oldest Law of Physics, would be distributed across the colonies and eventually reach the Council archives. It wasn't just a scientific document, it was a manifesto, a declaration that ingenuity would always triumph over control. She paused, glancing at the photo on her desk, her old research team, taken before the ban, back when humanity still played by the galaxy's rules. She smiled sadly. We didn't break their law, she whispered. We outgrew it. The next morning, Admiral Brooks and Captain Cole prepared to depart. As their shuttle lifted off, the surface of Luna glimmered with construction lights. New factories were rising, new ships were being forged. Humanity wasn't just building weapons, they were building a future defined by their own terms. Ethan looked out the viewport, watching the pale curve of Earth grow larger in the distance. You think they'll ever forgive us for what we started? Brooks shook her head. Forgive us? No. Fear us? Absolutely. He smiled. Then I guess we're doing something right. She turned to him. The galaxy made a mistake when it tried to tame us. They thought they could write peace into existence. But peace doesn't come from laws, it comes from balance. And right now, balance favors us. Outside, the stars gleamed brighter than ever before. Humanity had sparked something unstoppable, an evolution of thought, a rebellion of creativity. The Railstorm had started as a loophole, but now it was a revolution. And as the Resolute prepared for its next deployment, one message echoed across every human frequency. You can ban our weapons, but you'll never ban our imagination.